In environmental consulting, data is everywhere. But at ELOS, our most valuable asset isn't a report or a tool. It's our people. Passionate, dedicated, deeply committed to your project's success. They are what sets us apart. Because at ELOS, we don't just do the work, we believe in it. Our people are the problem solvers, the innovators, the trusted advisors. United by a shared mission, the desire to make a difference. To our clients, to our communities, to our environment, to our future. ELOS Environmental, people who care, results that matter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bud Faust. I'm the marketing coordinator here at ELOS. Today, we'll be taking a look at the NRCS EWP program, kind of the basics, particularly relevant given that Monday was the start of hurricane season, which runs through the end of November, as most of you already know. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all, we are recording the presentation. It will be available before the end of the week on our YouTube channel. You will receive a notification when it is posted there. If you want to rewatch it, share it with a colleague, feel free. Also, we will be taking questions, but not until the end of the presentation. If you do have a question, you can enter it through the chat function. But again, we won't be addressing questions until the end of the presentation. This is part of a monthly webinar series that we have on a variety of educational topics. If you'd like to keep up with what's coming up next, or even shoot us a message about a potential idea, feel free to give us a follow on LinkedIn, because that's where we will post our next webinar. With that, I want to thank you again for joining us today, taking some time out of your day, and I'm going to turn you over to our presenter, Mr. Corey Ricks.
How y'all doing this morning? Thank y'all for joining into the webinar. Today we'll be talking about, after the storm, the ABCs of NRCS, EWP, and disaster recovery. My name's Corey Ricks. As I said, I've been with ELOS for almost 10 years now. I started out as just a field biologist, migrated into a project management role, and now I'm over all the business development at ELOS. A little bit about ELOS. So ELOS started 20 years ago. Started out doing wetland delineations, permitting, kind of migrated into some different services, including industrial hygiene, grant management, GIS, cultural resources. So it's a little bit about ELOS. We are now a part of Aventia, along with a few other sister companies, BM Systems, ECM Consultants, which is our newest acquisition, St. Germain, Habitat Management, and Casey Harvey. One of our core services in disaster recovery is this EWP program. This is something that ELOS has been involved with for the past 10 years or so. This grant program is a great program. I'm excited to talk about it today. We've helped secure over $135 million in federal funding for local entities, public entities, through this program, and cleaned over 2,000 miles of waterways. So NRCS, for those who don't know, stands for Natural Resource Conservation Service. It's part of USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture. It's a subsidiary of that. So NRCS provides critical technical and financial assistance to communities to help recover from natural disasters such as floods, fires, hurricanes, tornadoes. Ice storms is another one that we had earlier this year that came up in Louisiana, so I'll bring that up. That's another one. The EWP program is administered through NRCS, and it's a recovery program that safeguards lives, property, and infrastructure for the public. It's not just a cleanup, but the removal of imminent threats to infrastructure within the watershed. This grant program typically has a 75 to 25 cost share between NRCS and the local sponsor. NRCS taking the 75 and local sponsor the 25. There are some events that are more extreme, such as Ida or Hurricane Katrina, where that cost share may actually increase a little bit on NRCS side. That is a possibility, but typically, in most cases, it's a 75 to 25% cost share of the total construction costs and technical and the financial assistance side of it, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Who can apply? So the eligible sponsors that can apply is any legal subdivision of state government. It could be a city, a county, a parish. It could be a water or a soil conservation district. It could be a drainage district, tribal governments, and the entity that is actually applying for this must have legal authority to acquire the land rights or the water rights of the action wherever the project's going to be at. So they have to have legal authority to actually do this. Sometimes, in some cases with EWP, the parish may not own, or the parish or whoever the sponsor is may not own the actual property where the work needs to be done. So they have to have landowner permissions to be able to do that work. But it has to flow through the public entity. So define imminent threat for debris removal. So there's some eligible activities and some non-eligible. Here's an example of, we'll talk about a few things that are eligible activities. So in a waterway or drainage conveyance, any log jam that has accumulated within that waterway that is upstream from a bridge or threatens to break loose, to smash into the bridge or block up the drainage, and to block up the drainage within that waterway could be eligible for this program. Now it has to, the debris itself typically has to be tied back to a storm or some sort of event. It could be a flood, tornado, as we said earlier, a fire, ice storm that has caused, debris to get into that waterway and clog it up. Leaders and hangers are also something else that could be eligible under EWP if after a storm we notice some broken limbs or trees that are halfway fallen have not fell all the way, but they're leaning towards that drainage conveyance and could potentially fall in the next, or with the next event that could potentially happen. That could be another eligible item within that EWP program. So some ineligible activities, anything that maybe has just naturally fallen over time within that waterway is typically not eligible. So say we had a flood event that happened on the west side of the state, and on the east side we tried to apply for EWP program for a waterway that may have had a few trees that fell into it. That is not necessarily eligible because it's not necessarily tied to that event, that natural disaster event. Overgrown drainage ditches, typically these drainage ditches are maintained by a drainage district, or maybe even a parish or some other public entity. And if they haven't maintained that ditch, it doesn't necessarily fit under the EWP program. If it has some kind of sediment buildup or brush overgrowth over that waterway, it's not tied to that natural disaster. Upland forest clearing is another thing that's not necessarily covered by EWP. EWP itself is for watershed protection. Typically, upland is not necessarily within the watershed. So define imminent threat for another part of the EWP program. So there's a few different things that can happen that can apply under EWP. Not only like cleaning of waterways or drainage conveyances, you can have stream bank stabilization type projects. Say we had a large rain event that caused huge scouring issues along a waterway. near a roadway or a building of some sort that causes a threat to that building or that roadway, this program could help stabilize that bank. You could use this program to get that bank stabilized. So we've had a few of these events over the last few years in Louisiana where we've had high water events where banks have started to erode and threatened infrastructure, and EWP has picked up the project to help stabilize that bank and get it back where it doesn't pose a threat anymore. Ineligible activities, so there could be some like backyard soil erosion issues along a creek that has been slowly eroding away for just years and years and years, not necessarily tied to a single event. That doesn't necessarily threaten any public utilities or any kind of other infrastructure or home or anything like that. Those do not fit the eligibility of EWP. So another thing that EWP can be used for is levees and water structures that have been impacted by a disaster. Non-federal levee breach could be an eligible activity. This could be you could have like a local levee board that may have something that's a non-federal levee that's been impacted by some sort of disaster, and EWP could actually come in and help fix that issue. Also with blocked water intakes, you could have maybe a weir that was damaged or any other type of water control structure. I haven't seen it with a dam, but I'm sure like a dam could fall under this as well. Ineligible activities, USAC levee breaches or any other type of federal levee breach, EWP doesn't really pick that up. That's on the Corps or the federal level that would have to pick that one up. Another ineligible activity I wanted to bring up is like rusted out culverts. Those they're not necessarily tied to the storm event. That's just, something that's been there for a long time. It may have caused some drainage issues, but not necessarily tied to any type of disaster. Now, if that culvert is there and maybe there's another issue that's involved with it, EWP may be able to pick that up as part of the eligibility. So understanding the 75-25 match, so the federal share is 75% NRCS. They pay for 3/4 of the eligible construction costs of the project. This includes the actual labor, the equipment, any of the materials that may be used by the contractors to remove the debris or stabilize the banks. Not covered would be like easements that may be necessary to perform the work or any kind of land rights, any kind of permits that may be required, whether it be federal, state, or local permits that may be required, is not covered by NRCS. Operation and maintenance costs and any administrative overhead that's involved with this is not covered by NRCS's cost share. That would be the sponsor's responsibility, and that could be part of their 25%. So no, a part of the 25% that the sponsor could put towards the construction costs of a project, that have in-kind type contributions that can be used. So say the public entity has some of the workforce and equipment that may be necessary to do some of the work, they could perform that, and that what they're doing is that it can be used as part of their 25% cost share for the construction cost. They would have to set up a force account labor and track time sheets and equipment use and actually monetize that to reach up to that 25%. You'd have to keep records of all that stuff, but it can be used towards your 25% match or just a monetary commitment to that as well, paying for some of the invoices that may be required may come through for the construction costs, maybe paying 25% of that, and then the NRCS would pay the other 75% of each invoice. That's one way that can be done. So this is the most important part of the EWP program. Say a disaster strikes, whether it be a tornado, flood, you typically have 60 days to request help through the EWP program with the state engineer for NRCS. Each state has a different one, and you would submit a letter to them requesting assistance through the EWP program to fix whatever the issue may be, whether it be a non-federal levee breach, waterway debris, or some kind of stream bank stabilization. At this time, you don't necessarily have to have all of the information or all of the justification for that project to request the assistance, but you want to at least know that, hey, I have some issues here and we need to look at it. I want to make sure it's eligible, but I need to request the assistance. So you typically have 60 days from the time of the event to request that. And it's a simple letter that's sent to the engineer, and they'll review it and approve it, or deny it. But typically, if they're going to approve it, or before they approve or deny it, they'll want to come look at it and get maybe some pictures or something to justify the request. Performance periods after they've agreed to help, it's typically the sponsor's responsibility to give some justification for why they need to help and what the project may entail. What's the project limits? If it's a waterway, there may be some survey that's required of an assessment of the damage of that. Typically pictures, GPS coordinates with a map to show where the damage is at. And that would be submitted to them. They would, if they approve it, then they would go into an agreement with that local sponsor. NRCS would put together an agreement, and with that agreement, after you sign it, after all parties have signed, we typically have 220 days to complete the work. Now, there may be some limitations with that. Not necessarily limitations, but some exceptions where you can push that out some more. If permits are required and we still haven't received permits, we can request extensions of that time period. But typically they give you 220 days and you have to show some movement forward to get that extension. And there's also other situations where it may be an emergency situation, such as a levee that may have broke that threatens flooding of a whole community. That's a non-federal levee. That could be a situation where it could be an emergency situation. They would fast track it and we'd get it done quickly. Kind of talked about this already, but the request letter, just a formal description of what the disaster event was and when it struck, location and nature of the damage, a statement from the sponsor's ability to provide the actual 25% match, and the contact information of the local project manager is the key components. So after we've provided the information to NRCS, all of the assessments of what the damage may be, NRCS actually looks at that. They may actually go out to the site as well, look at it. Typically they do. And they also run what they call a benefit cost ratio of what the damage is, what's the cost to fix the damage, whether it be debris removal, levee repair, or stream bank stabilization, and then what the value is of the property that it's actually protecting. So they have to do a lot of background research on this. What's the infrastructure in the area that is potentially in harm's way if this work is not done? And then what's the cost to remove it? And so all of that is calculated by NRCS. They do it in-house with their engineers. And then if it meets the BCR, if it's less than 1, then the project cannot be funded, but if it's above a 1, then the project can be funded and actually approved by NRCS. Contract and who does the work. So there's a few different ways that this can be handled. NRCS actually can go and actually do the work. They can do all the bidding themselves. They can bid out a contractor to actually come in and do the work and provide the technical assistance that may be required during the construction. The sponsor would pay their 25% share in this case. Another way is, and this is the more typical way, is that the sponsor is actually the awarder. They put the project out to bid for contractors for the construction side, and also they could put out a RFQ or a solicitation for the technical assistance side as well. The sponsor would hire the contractor, and they would have to go through, your local procurement rules, but also federal rules through the EWP program because it's a federal program. NRCS would also reimburse the sponsor for 75% of the cost. So some common mistakes with the EWP program is trying to jumpstart some of the work prior to having an agreement signed that may be eligible for reimbursement through NRCS. Any of the construction, if you try to do any of the construction prior to having that agreement, none of that would be considered reimbursable if it's done before the agreement. Any of the technical assistance that may be done prior may not be reimbursed as well. Another thing is the permit coordination. So permitting itself is the local sponsor's responsibility, whether it be federal, state, or local. NRCS could provide some technical help with this, and they actually could get some of the permits that may be required for it. In certain situations, they will do that. They also do a cultural resource review of that, Section 106 review of that. Documentation. So if you are using in-kind labor, I've already said this once, but it's important that you have certified payrolls and equipment logs of all the equipment that's being used for this project and the people that are actually working on this project. Not tracking that may mean you can't get reimbursed for it. That's all I have. So this was more of a just a review of a high level overview of EWP. EWP is a great program for any local entity after a disaster to recover. But there's a lot more that goes into this. It is a grant program, and ELOS is here to help in any kind of way that if this becomes a problem for any of these local entities, ELOS can help. We've been doing it for a long time.
All right, thank you, Corey. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll get you an answer. While we're waiting for any questions, just a reminder that the video of this webinar will be posted on our YouTube channel before the end of the week. Feel free to watch again, forward the link to any colleagues or anyone else you think might be interested in the content. Give us a follow on LinkedIn to see what topics we'll be covering in upcoming webinars as well. Let's see. Not seeing any questions at the moment, which of course means that our presenter was so great that he left you with no unanswered questions. But we'll give it a couple of moments here to see if anybody has any questions. Okay, still not seeing any questions. Give it another minute before we wrap things up. Again, we want to thank you for taking the time to visit with us today and learn about this program. If you have any questions that come to mind later or come up later during hurricane season, Corey's email address is in the chat box. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to him. He'd be more than happy to get back to you with an answer. Still not seeing any questions. So with that, we're going to bid you a good rest of your day. Thank you again for joining us. Keep an eye out for the replay on our YouTube channel, and we hope to see you next month. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you all.